Okay, so now in the chapter that deals with sorrows, joys and sorrows, we're dealing now with the part that deals with the nature of future joys and sorrows. Our next question will be 9773, but I always like to remind ourselves, I think it's always good, following the sequence of this book, how Kardec places things together. We just completed before this chapter, before this book, the chapter that deals with the natural laws, with the divine or natural laws. And the very first question dealing with this, the natural laws, Kardec asks the Spirit, what are the natural laws? And the Spirit's answer that the natural laws is God's laws. It alone ensures the happiness of human beings. It shows them what they should or should not do, and that they only suffer when they deviate from it. And then the following book deals with joys and sorrows, right? And in this answer from the Spirit, it's telling us here that our joys and sorrows derive from follow or not following the natural laws. And more important, given sequence in the studies of the natural laws, Kardec has the Spirit's, where are these laws written? And the Spirit says that it's written in our conscience. Because God is absolute justice. He could not place us in the field of work, of playing, without giving us the rules of the game. We would not, let's say that you teach kids and you're going to put kids to play soccer. You're going to give them the rules of the game first. No, you cannot use your hands, you cannot push your thing. You give all the rules so that when they play the game, you can just fight, oh, you committed a fault here. I told you cannot do that, right? If we do that, as imperfect as we are, would not God, with its infinite perfection, give us the rules of the game and say, here's the laws, the divine laws that I created for your happiness. Follow them, and you have no trouble. Follow them and stay in a state of happiness, right? The allegory of the Mosaic Genesis, Adam and Eve, is like that. They live in paradise. There was no problem, there was no suffering, until they receive a command. And all they have to do is follow that command. And they deviate from that command. They decide to use to eat the apple. What that means in that Mosaic Genesis, because of course it's a tale, right? With moral teachings. It tells us that God created rules for us to stay in that state of paradise, in happiness. And you only fall off of that when you go against those laws, when you deviate from that. So when again, the next part of they're dealing over here with natural or nature of joys and sorrows, we can conclude that the nature of joys and sorrows is by deviating of those divine laws imprinted in our conscience. When you do something wrong, we know that something wrong. Our conscience accuses us. Our conscience let us know. Otherwise, God would not be just, right? And in other words, that we need to pay attention in our reading over here, those words come from time to time, is when the spirits use the word punishment. Well, the divine laws are not punitive, they are corrective. So when we see the word punishment, we should equal that as an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to make reparation, to redirect us back to the laws that are imprinted in our conscience for us to live in a state of happiness, for us to avoid the state of sorrow. And another word that comes from time to time, the word suffering. I think it's clear to everyone that suffering is extremely relative. What may be suffering for someone, both physical and mental and spiritual, may not be such a suffering for other individuals. When an individual sees a challenge, difficult circumstances, an opportunity of learning, and an opportunity of reparation, it ceases to be a suffering. But when one sees that difficult circumstance, those challenges, as a punishment, God does not like me, why me, why this, then you aggravate it. Then it becomes something that is difficult to bear with. So there's tremendous relativity in this word suffering, that you have to take it at the individual basis, right? Because we may have committed the same crime against the divine laws, and we may go through different atonement for reparation of that. And that comes from how do you see that event? How do you repent from that event? And how do you prepare ourselves to deal with the reparation of those infractions towards against those divine laws? I think it's always good to remind ourselves when we're dealing with these words, always remind ourselves that God is not here to punish us. God does not have any intention to punish us. God has an intention to redirect us towards those divine laws that create for our happiness, because God wants our happiness, right? There's a sentence that I like very much that says that God educates through love and re-educates through pain. The choice is ours. The choice is always ours. Okay? I think it's just good for us to keep reminding ourselves of those things when we're dealing with a chapter that brings so much thoughts of suffering, of sorrows, of words of punishment, that it always derives from not following, for staying away from the divine laws that are already printed in our conscience. And the intention of God and those in allowing us to go to any kind of challenge is to redirect us, to allow us to make corrections, to stay in the path that leads to our true happiness, because that is the will of God. Okay? Having said that, 973, please, Philip.
Okay. What are the greatest sufferings that a bad spirit can endure? It is impossible to describe the mental tortures that serve as atonement for some crimes, as even those who experience them would find it difficult to give you an idea. However, the most frightful of them all is the belief that the atonement lasts for all eternity. People form a more or less elevated idea about the joys and sorrows of the soul after death, depending on an individual's intelligence. The greater the development of individuals, the more refined will be their idea of them, and the more rational their views of the subject. The less literally will they interpret figurative language. Enlightened reasoning teaches us that the soul is an entirely spiritual being. It teaches us that a spirit is not affected by impressions that act only upon matter, and yet it does not imply that it is exempt from suffering or that it does not experience. I'm sorry, I have to refine my place. Or that it does not experience discipline as a consequence of its wrongdoing. Spirit communications show us the future state of the soul no longer as a mere theory, but as a reality. They thrust before us all the incidents of life beyond the grave. However, they also show us that they are the natural consequences of terrestrial life. They show us that although they are free from fanciful accessories created by human imaginations, they are painful for those who have made bad use of their abilities during this life. The diversity of the consequences is infinite, but we can say, in summary, that each spirit atones for its wrongdoings, each one is punished where one has sinned. Some are punished by the incessant sight of the evil they have done, others by regret, fear, shame, doubt, isolation, darkness, separation from their loved ones, and so on.
Thank you. So again, keep in mind that suffering is extremely relative. And we don't have an objective scale for measurement of pain, neither physical pain, mental pain, or spiritual pain, or moral pain, if you prefer. Exactly because of its relativity. It's extremely relative. If you are, let's say, admitted to a hospital, the nurse going to come, so you have any pain? And say, yes. From 0 to 10, what is your pain? And you scratch your head, so what that means. And they may create saying, well, 1 being, it's painful, but it doesn't bother me. And 10 being excruciating pain that I'd rather die than have it. Well, so someone may have a toothache that they'd rather die than have it. And someone may have the same toothache and say, I can deal with that a few more days. The same problem, extremely relative. But one thing that the Spirit tells us that is a common, extremely painful for the spirits in the spiritual world, the discarnate spirit, is the most frightful of them. But them always they believe that the atonement lasts for all eternity. What that equals to? It equals the loss of hope. That equals no hope. And hope, as I have spoken last Monday, is a natural part of being a spiritual human being. We always have hope. But again, I mean, for everybody who's working now, we're planning vacation for 6 months, for a year from now. We don't know if we're going to last another day. You don't know if there is a atomic bomb, tick-tock in our brain, ready to go up and an aneurysm exploding and you die immediately. Who knows? Nobody's doing no MRIs of their brain to see if they have an aneurysm or not. Right? But we don't think of it. We don't think that we have an aneurysm. I think that in 6 months from now, we're going to go vacation, going to have a good time and those things. Because it's natural for us to live with no hope of getting out of a bad situation is what they call over here one of the most frightful pain that the spirits experience in the spiritual world. Imagine being in the lower zone in a dark place and being tormented by your victims of the past and they trying to seek revenge. And you have the idea that I cannot ever get out of this. I'm going to be suffering this throughout eternity. It is indeed something that will be extremely frightful for the spirit. But also it's mentioned in the books on Brazil, it's mentioned by all the spirits, that something that is extremely painful for the spirit is regret. The regret causes tremendous amount of pain, so much so that Euripides Porsanulfo in Life of the Spirit, when he discarnate, he asked and was given permission to open a hospital in the spiritual world to receive spiritists. Because we know so much, we understand so much, and we practice so little. And most of us end up in the spiritual pain with tremendous amount of regret. And it's regret for the things that you have done wrong, but also regret for the things, the opportunities that you wasted, the things that you could have done, especially for spiritists. And you waste those opportunities. Those regret, according to most of the spirits, is something that is extremely painful for the spirit. And we can understand that, right? When Kardec puts it here, that spirit communication was the future state of the soul no longer as a mere theory, but a reality, especially when you read the book, Heaven and Hell, I'm sorry. Heaven and Hell, that there is a part of the happy spirits and the suffering spirits that they relate the experience in the spiritual world. And the rate was that all their experiences, good and bad, derived from what they have done during their very last incarnation. And when you suffer and you now understand that you suffer is because of the things that you did wrong or the things that you could have done right and did not do, that generates an immense amount of regret and pain. Another way to understand this loss of hope, let's say that I committed a crime and I go to jail and they say that I'm going to be in jail for 1 year. Spend time in jail for 1 year, man, it might be a tremendous amount of suffering, but I know that I'll be out in it. I'm gonna suffer the time, but I have a hope that I'm gonna get out of here in a year, gonna have to rebuild my life and make plans to be out of it. It minimizes my suffering. If I commit a crime, they put me in jail and say, you're going to stay here, we don't know for how long. That is already a tremendous amount of suffering, because now you don't know how long am I going to stay here. Every day you're going to be thinking, how long am I going to stay here without hope? That in itself is a tremendous amount of you still have some hope because they didn't say they're never going to get out. But the torment is there in not knowing the time that you have to spend in there. And the third option, they say, you're going to stay here to eternity, or it's a life sentence. Then you have no hope, you have no, then you're going to suffer every single day knowing that you have no possibility of opportunity of get out, rebuild your life, repair the mistakes. No, you are condemned to eternity. That would be a tremendous amount of paying for that split. Okay. I think it's a very important question for us to think about it. Any questions there? Any comment? All right, let's go to 974 then.
From where does the theory of eternal fire originate? An image that has been taken literally, like so many others. Nonetheless, can this fear lead to a useful result? Look around you and see whether there are many who are restrained by it, even among those by whom it is preached. If you teach what contradicts reason, the impressions you make are neither long-lasting nor advantageous. Human language is unable to express the nature of this suffering. Therefore, human beings have been unable to devise a compensation for it, one that is more appropriate than that of fire, because fire is both the most excruciating torture and the symbol of the most energetic action. This is why the belief in eternal fire has existed since the dawn of reason and has passed down by successive generations to the present day. Likewise, this is why all nations speak of fiery passions, burning love, burning with jealousy, and so on.
Okay, so eternal fire. It's being a part of most cultures for as long as civilization existed. It is in the Mesopotamian scriptures. It is, of course, in the Jewish scriptures. It is in the Greek. Problem is that they take this literally. The idea of a real fire and you burn in that fire in a literal sense. But that's why the spirits answer that an image that has been taken literally, like so many others. Even Jesus used that expression. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus, when he's speaking of the final judgment, he used the expression eternal fire. But we cannot take it in a literal sense. And the Spirit just will come and let us know that all trials, all atonements are temporary because we are predestined. If there is one thing that we are predestined to, is to reach purification, complete purification. There is a law of progress that does not allow us to stay in a eternal punishment perpetually. On the contrary, there is a law that is meant to leave us from that state of ignorance and reach the state of purified or perfected spirit. And in that terms, the Spiritism brings tremendous amount of consolation for ourselves, loved ones, individuals that we like, but we know have really dropped the ball seriously and are discarnate and now in some other religions, some other doctors say, oh, I love my ex, but X commits some serious crimes, and according to what I know, is going to be in the eternal fire. That is very sad for those individuals. Spiritualism brings the consolation that I know X commits some serious crime, really dropped the ball, is going to deal the consequences of its action, but we will have the opportunity for reparation. We will have the opportunity to go to the necessary atonement, to evolve, to progress, and eventually be purified like everyone else. There is tremendous amount of consolation. It might be a loved one, it might be your grandpa, your father, your mother, whatever. Let us say, that is hope. No one will burn throughout eternity. I think it's the immense amount of consolation that Spiritism bring to us. And then Kardec asked, but nonetheless, having this fear can be useful. Once I was in the Philippines with someone in the Philippines that is someone high in the politics over there, and I was being had the opportunity to talk to them. And I had a question that is like, in Brazil, there is a tremendous amount of poverty like here in the Philippines. But you don't see the level of crimes committed in Brazil as we see committed in the Philippines. And I asked, do you have an idea of why that would be? And the answer was, because we are a God-fearing people. We have the fear of God that keep us from committing those crimes. Of course, I was not very agreeable with that. And time went by, that was perhaps 20 years ago. The Filipinos today is having the same kind of criminality that we experience in Brazil. Perhaps not as the same frequency, but it's happening now. And that's exactly what the Spirit's telling us here, that if you teach what contradicts reason, the impressions you make are neither long-lasting nor adventurous. It may last for a little bit, that fear of God going to end up in in eternal punishment. It may last for a short while, but soon our moral character is more imperative than those fears. You prevail above those fears. And the Spirit proves over here. It does not even stop those who even create those ideas, those who even believe in those ideas. For one thing, can always find justification for our wrongdoings. Oh, I did, but in my case, if it's someone else, eternal punishment. But in my case, I have a justification. I have a reason for it. So I don't have to go to that eternal fire. We always do that. So the idea of eternal fire, once, do not take literally. Two, if it's prevent individual from commit serious errors, it's very short-lived because our ignorance overtakes that fear. And if you teach fear, once you reason intellectually overpower that fear, then what else do you have? So you have to teach what's right, what's correct from the beginning, and people will evolve from that standpoint. Because once you overpower the fear, I'm saying, God is nothing, doesn't do nothing for me. I don't fear God. But if you teach God is love, God is justice, God's goodness, instead of being that tyrant judge who is going to send you to eternal fire, then you teach the right thing and something that individuals will worship and follow much more than fear. Fear is short-lived. And then Kardec makes a comment in relationship, why fire, right? Because fire, if you look at the natural elements, being earth, water, wind, and fire, is the one more destructive. Is the one that causes the most immediate pain to us. So if you're going to use an element to create fear, or to use not in a literal sense, but as an analogy of the suffering that you may experience for your wrongdoing, the choice naturally to be fire, for being the most destructive, the most powerful of all those elements, that we feel its consequence more drastically in ourselves. But again, when it's written as an analogy, not to be taken in a literal sense. Comments, questions? Okay, just a second, and bring this up. Okay, let's go. 975.
Do inferior spirits understand the happiness of the virtuous? Yes, and that happiness is a source of torment for them. They understand that their own deeds deprive them of it. It also leads them to seek a new physical existence to shorten the duration of that torment when death frees them from matter. If good use is made of this existence, it is on this basis that they choose the appropriate trials to atone for their faults. It must be remembered that spirits suffer for all the wrongdoing they have done or which they have been the voluntary cause, all the good that they might have done and did not do, and all the evil that has resulted from failing to do the good they might have done. When errant, it is as though a spirit emerges from a fog and sees the obstacles that stand between it and ultimate happiness. Therefore, it suffers more because it understands the full extent of its culpability. There are no more illusions for it. It sees things as they really are. When errant, a spirit sees all its past lives at a glance and foresees the future promised to it. It understands what it still needs to do to reach the future. It is like traveler who's having reached the top of a hill, sees both the road it traveled and what it still has to travel to reach the end of the journey.
Thank you. So do inferior spirits understand the happiness of the virtuous? Most of them, yes. There might be a very small percentage in such a level of ignorance, of under moral development, that still does not have that realization. Definitely, we do. Most spirits will have that understanding. And since we are inferior spirits, and we understand the happiness of the virtuous one, we are filled with envy, we are filled with jealousy, and that is another cause of torment for the suffering spirits. Misery loves company. When we are miserable, we seek to make people miserable around us to share our pain. So that happens to us in the spiritual world when we are in that state of moral delinquency. The pain in the spiritual world is much greater, is much augmented than while incarnate. Everything, all of our senses, all of our feelings are much more augmented when we are free from this physical body, who serves pretty much as a buffer, who limits our potential of understanding, of the realization, the reflection of many things. Because life in the physical plane, life in the physical body, imposes many other things upon us that takes from us the ability to make those reflections. But back in the spiritual world, without the limitations of the physical body, now that we sense completely throughout the perispirit without the necessity of specific organs. Now that it's almost like Kardec puts over here, or Spirit puts over here, a fog is removed from us. We see the reality. And when it comes to the realization that the reality that our difficult situation in the spiritual worlds comes from our actions in the spiritual world or the physical world, the things that you have done wrong and the things that you could have done right and chose not to do, creates even more envy of those who, on the contrary, make good use of their reincarnation, have done all the right things that they could have done, and now are enjoying the results, the consequences of their hard work. It's like you know, the fable of the ants and what is the bird that insect that sings all the time and explodes of singing. Forgot the name. But anyway, the one who spends the whole summer working, building reserve for the winter when they are not able to collect anything, do the hard work, do the right thing. The winter comes, and now they have enough supply to go through the winter. And someone will say, oh, the summer is to enjoy, forget about work. When the winter comes, I deal with it. And spend the whole summer, at the beach and get a nice suntan, and the winter comes and they don't have any supply. And then they look, oh my God, I should have done like my neighbor. I should have done like to take some time and make my reserve for the hardship of the winter. And they recognize they have one themselves to blame. There's tremendous amount of sorrow for those spirits as well. And the spirits over here, And there are many reasons to regret, not only for the bad things they have done, but it says over here, it must be remembered that spirits suffer for all the wrongdoing they have done, or which they have been the voluntary cause, all the good they have might have done and did not do, and all the evil that has resulted from failing to do the good that they might have done. This is a bag load of stuff for us to reflect. That, in other words, to not do bad is not good enough. We must do good. We can't come out there and say, but I didn't do anything wrong. And they're going to tell you, well, but I had this opportunity to do this right. We had this opportunity to develop this, that didn't that virtue. You have that opportunity to avoid those bad things to happen, and you did nothing. So doing nothing equals doing bad. And that is another source of regret, is another source of sorrow that we experience in the spiritual world. And if we are ignorant, morally speaking, enough, we will not only suffer from the consequences of our actions, but we will aggravate our suffering by being jealous of those who have done what they are supposed to do. It just augment, it just create more problem for us for having that jealousy, instead of recognize that those guys have done the right thing, they deserve it, then we go in a state of envy, of jealousy, and that's another source of suffering for the spirit. Any comments, any questions? Okay. 976.
Is seeing suffering spirits a cause of distress for the good ones? If so, what becomes of the happiness of the latter, as that happiness has been impaired? Good spirits are not distressed by the suffering of those who are at a lower point than themselves, because they know that it will one day end. They lend a helping hand to assist those who suffer to become better. This is their occupation and a joy for them when they succeed. This isn't, continue?
Yes, please.
This is understandable for spirits who are strangers and who take no special interest in them. However, does observing their pain and suffering disturb the happiness of spirits who have loved them on earth? If spirits do not see your suffering, it is because you are strangers to them, and yet religion preaches that the souls of the departed continue to see you, but they see you from another point of view. They know that this suffering helps you advance if you bear it. You need to move up. With resignation, and they are more pained by the lack of resilience that holds you back than by what they know is temporary suffering.
Okay, so here Kardec asks, the question is, a spiritual state of happiness ceases to be happiness when they witness the suffering of other spirits. If the spirit have reached that state of happiness, it's because it has a more elevated moral and intellectual progress, which allows them to see the suffering of other spirits as something that is necessary, but that will go away, that will be resolved. Then the spirits understanding that in our path to progress, we need to go through reparations of the mistakes of the past. And those reparations may not be very pleasant, or they are not pleasant most of the time. But they rejoice instead of cease to have that happens. They rejoice that the Spirit is having the opportunity to go through that reparation. They may be thankful. We have a loved one diagnosed with a cancer, and they say, this cancer is treatable. We need to go through this and that chemotherapy and radiation, which is extremely difficult and painful, but there is the opportunity of recovery. You rejoice to know that my loved one will suffer the treatment. The treatment will be difficult, but it has a length of duration. And after that, my loved one will be cured from that cancer and you continue his or her life. So you take that as something to rejoice about. If you have some moral, intellectual ability, right? Your kid, 3, 5 years old, needs to go and get needle for a vaccination. The kid does not understand and say, Mommy, Daddy is bad and just allow the guy to stick this needle in me. But you are both that. You understand that the kid will suffer, the kid may be rebellious against that needle and everything else, but you understand the good effects that you bring about for that kid. And you let your loved one, your child, suffer a needle in the back, a needle in the arm, because you understand. The same thing with the spirits in the spiritual world. They will see our suffering, but they understand that it's short-lived. That is, what short-lived depends upon us, not doing what we are supposed to do, right? And God that continues, but that is well easy to understand for spirits that are stranger to us. But what about the loved one? What about if it, is a spirit suffering in the spiritual world, in the lower zones, being bombarded by negativity, by being bombarded by their victims, being victimized by those who want to enslave them, and all that bad stuff. And it's someone that is dear to your heart. Does it change? Well, the spirit's more evolved, it's not going to change. The spirit will do everything they can do to help, especially if it's a loved one. But they also know that the spirit is that situation that they place themselves in there and that they receive all the opportunities to get out of there, and eventually they will get out of that situation. Now, if it's a spirit in a state of more ignorance, then that would not apply. So this question here, the answer here applies for what about spirits? And I think that most of our spirits are in that you'll be able to go back in the spiritual plane and see that a lot of one is going through difficulty. That will do everything that you can to help, but will not be suffering the suffering of that loved one, because we know that they cause that for themselves, and they're going to hope them to have all the opportunities to get out of it, and they will get out of it. Okay? And we see that in the books of André Luiz, when we see, especially Hilario and André Luiz, when they deal with the suffering of special incarnate, that they feel that almost as if they are suffering themselves. But their mentors, the mentors of André Luiz, of the life and spiritual world, they don't suffer at all. They say, well, it's part of the growth. You're going to help here, you're going to ameliorate, you're going to give them everything they need to get out of this. But they don't suffer because they understand that they need to go through that process in order to progress, in order to make themselves better, the same way that we understand a lot of one going through chemotherapy, radiation to get rid of a cancer, the same way that allow our kid to get a needle to prevent serious disease in the future. Higher is more elevated spirit, you'll see in the same case. comments, questions?
$977.
Yes, please.
If spirits are unable to hide their thoughts or all the acts of their lives from each other, does it mean that those who have wronged others are always in the presence of their victims? Common sense tells you that it cannot be otherwise. Is the disclosure of all our reprehensible acts and the perpetual presence of those who have been our victims an atonement for the guilty? Yes, and it is more substantial than you think. It only lasts until they make amends for wrongdoing, either as a spirit or as a person in new physical lives. When we are in the spirit world, our entire past is revealed, and the good or bad we did is known. Those who have done evil, who try to avoid their victims, do so in vain. They cannot escape their presence, and it is an atonement and a source of remorse until they atone for the wrongs they have done. Conversely, kindness and goodwill surrounds the spirit of an upright person. Even on earth, yeah, where did it go? Even on earth, there is no greater torment for a bad person than the presence of his or her victims, whom they try to avoid at all costs. What happens when the illusions of passions dissipate and they understand the wrongs they have done? When they see their secret actions brought to light and their hypocrisy unveiled, when they realize when they realize that they cannot hide from those they have wronged, while the soul of the wicked is prey to shame, regret, and remorse, the soul of the virtuous enjoys perfect peace.
Let's imagine a situation, and let's say I created a gossip, a falsehood towards someone in my social life. I lied about, I demoralized that individual, and eventually I got to know that, of course, I spoke behind his back, right? Created that lied about that individual, but behind their back. But I got to know that everything that I have said and done against the individual, that individual got to know of it. And that individual is naturally angry at me, suffered for what I have done. How am I going to face that individual? I'm going to avoid this guy as much as possible, right? Let's say there is a social event, a social gathering that I know that individual will do. Likely, I'm not going. No, if there is a restaurant that I like very much and I'm looking forward to eat the food over there, when I pass by, I look at the window and I see that the guy is sitting at a table over there, I'm going to go eat somewhere else. I'm going to avoid that guy as much as possible. Who is suffering now? Who is really being tormented? The one who's deprived from the social gatherings, deprived from going to places everyone likes to go. Let's say that my kids and the kids of that person go to the same school, and there is an event in the school for the kids, and my kid really want me to go, but because I know that the guy would be there, I'm not going. Now, I'm not only suffering from my wrongdoers and passing my suffering to my kids who say, why dad is not going to participate in the things that I'd like dad to be here to see me doing. Wouldn't be a lot more honorable if I take an attitude to say, well, I realize my wrong. I'm gonna go, look for this guy. I gotta, show him my face and say, hey, I did it. I have no skills. What's wrong? I ask my apologies. I ask you to give the opportunity to repair anything that I have done. Now I put the ball at the guy's hand. Now in a way, it becomes his problem now. So I'm here showing that I was wrong. That I'm not lying. Everything that I said was a lie. I know that I caused you pain. I know that you are angry. I'm asking for forgiveness and for the opportunity to repair the wrongdoing that I have done. If that individual has a little bit of a moral upgrade, you say, you know what? Go live your life. I'm not able to forgive you yet, but it's over, no problem. If it's more enlightened to say, yeah, you're forgiven, everybody drops the ball. I'm glad you recognize your error. Okay? And I say, now I don't see how you're gonna have to pay back. Now the ball is in his court. Now it's up to him. I have understood, I have done the regret, and I have put myself in the position to make the reparation. The 3 stages of progress and do wrong things, right? Recognition of the error, the regret, and then the reparation. I've done all the 3 stages. I'm here to repair, I've done everything. If the individual does not accept, I'm done with it. Okay. In the spiritual world, there is no more hiding. I may hide of this guy very well incarnate. But if you don't resolve all the issues over here, that's why Jesus tells us, right? If you have a quarrel with your neighbor, put down your gifts and go and make good you with that individual. It's not sit here and wait for the individual to come. No, you go after the individual and you make it what you have to do, right? And you take care of the business. Otherwise, come to the spiritual world, there is no more hiding. We are transparent, absolutely transparent. And when they say the criminal always return to the site of crime, it's true. It's absolutely true. You may not be doing the physical existence, but definitely when you go back to the spiritual world. And in the book Heaven and Hell, it's full of witness of this thing. Individuals who have committed the crimes and have the presence of the victims asking, seeking revenge 24/7. There's a case of one spirit who have committed a murder and he lives his entire 24 hours in a pot of blood. All he sees is blood. Everything he touches is blood. Until you have that regret, seek reparation, and then things starts to happen to you. Here we can fake. We can say that we are sorrow out of the mouth, that you're not gonna do it again out of the mouth. In the spiritual world, we are transparent. The out of the mouth is not worth anything. If you committed that crime and there is no real regret, there is no sorrow for what you have done, it'll be like a bright neon red light on your forehead, say, yeah, I am guilty, I've done, and I still don't regret. And you're going to have to face your victims until you start to change that kind of attitude. And eventually, we will. What else is important here? Again, it's important to go back to the definition of punishment. Those individuals are not being punished. They have an opportunity to think of what they have done. They have an opportunity to get in the state of regret, not stay in a state of guilty, because guilt paralyzes you, but the regret propels you forward, seek to make reparation. Many of us, unfortunately, need to be exposed to that suffering to eventually say, oh my God, I can't deal with this guy anymore, seeking revenge. Now I realize I was wrong. At the moment they make that realization, things starts to change. Okay. You see in the books of André Luiz, and see with the experience of André Luiz himself, at the moment that they start to think of having some regret of the wrongdoings, then they are able to notice the assistance that is always there present for them. So it's something that you produce for yourself. And sometimes we need to go to those traumas, seeing your victims all the time, living a pool of blood all the time, to start to make you to think things and start to have that regret that will open a window that you create for yourself, that window of opportunity to notice the help that is always there available to us. So again, it's not a punishment, is a corrective process. Painful, but it's still corrective. The same way that chemotherapy and radiation may be painful, but will free you from a serious disease. We passed 1 minute. I'm sorry. Carol, are you there?
Yes, Elmo, I am. Shall I do the prayer?
Yes, please.
Oh, thank you so much for hosting for our class this evening. A very, very, very interesting class. Thank you. And thank you, Philip, for reading for us this evening. And everyone who is here, thank you for participating. Infinite Creator and Divine Providence, we give thanks to be together for our studies of the Spirit's Book, Book 4, Chapter 2, Nature of Future Joys and Sorrows. God's laws, which are called the natural laws, apply to all of our actions. These are the moral laws that reside within our conscience. Infractions against the divine laws are meant for our happiness and re-education, not for sorrow nor for eternal punishment. Each spirit will atone for its wrongdoing. There are various gradations. Assistance is always available and hope as well, even for those who fall into deep regret and fear. In Spiritism, we learn that the law of progress is a beautiful consolation for all souls and for everyone who is suffering moral delinquency. Let us proactively do good, lend a helping hand, and may we be kind and generous, no regrets. We give thanks to our spiritual benefactors and the good spirits for guiding and inspiring us this evening. May we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us, and for our loved ones, our teachers, our directors, our counselors, our mediums, our workers, and all participants. We pray for inner peace and especially now for world peace and for those who are suffering in the physical and spiritual worlds. We pray for our center, SGNY, and all Spiritist centers throughout the world, that they may grow, prosper, expand, and be protected throughout the day and throughout the night. As we close, we humbly ask for safety and protection as we return to our family, our friends, our loved ones, and our co-workers. And may we remind ourselves now to go forth as beacons of love, of light, of peace, of service, and charity, which is love in action. May peace and love prevail. So be it.
Thanks, everyone. You all, Sunday is the first of the month. We're going to work with the book Action and Reaction, chapter 19. Hopefully we'll finish it.
Great. Thank you so much, Elmo. Thanks, everyone.